Yeah, looks correct.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for AppSheet Office Hours focused on new AppScript integration capabilities and BigQuery Connector enhancements. My name is Lauren, and I'm the content manager on the Google Cloud community team. With us today, we have several members of the AppSheet team who will take us through an overview of the AppScript connector and using data from BigQuery, including helpful use cases and live demos. And then we'll leave the remainder of the time open for Q&A. So questions are encouraged, so please feel free to add those to the YouTube chat box. I see some people are already adding in those comments. Let us know where you're coming or tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you and your questions, and we'll make sure to get to them at the end. And the last thing to mention is that we are recording this session, so you'll be able to see the recap post plus additional resources and information in the AppSheet community. So you can refer to that link, which is in the YouTube description. Okay, enough from me. I will hand it over to the AppSheet team.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Hi, folks. I'm Carlin. I'm a PM of the AppSheet team, and today I have Chris here with me as well to share about our new AppScript connector feature. So we have a few slides about what you can do and when you might find this feature useful, and then Chris will show a live demo. So we'll get started. Lauren, next slide. All right, so first, what is AppScript and why use it? We get a lot of requests to have better and deeper Google integration so you can ultimately make better apps and more seamless experiences. And AppScript is Google's low-code platform that allows you to connect to many Google apps and services, over 30 different APIs and apps like that, including Google Workspace apps like Gmail, Calendar, Drive, Chat. So you can just create and automate more powerful workflows. We've already seen some pretty creative AppSheet users come up with workarounds to do this, to hook into AppScript today, and usually by using our webhook feature or our Sheets triggers, the Sheets triggers. But these approaches are usually insecure and clunky to use. So now we have this native connector for AppSheet automation to do it, and it opens just a world of possibilities for what you can do as a creator. Next slide. So here are some example use cases for how we've seen people use the AppScript to connect workflows together and leverage the best of Google Workspace too. So just going through a couple of these. For example, you could create actual calendar event invites that are added to a team calendar. And why might you do this? So maybe a manager can see what shifts or appointment slots are booked and assigned. But what's great about this is by adding these events directly to Google Calendar, you get a lot of things for free. Like on-device push notifications. People can customize their own reminders, easy ability to see the events in the context of the rest of your personal work calendars. And of course, you can share that team calendar with others for visibility too. And the second bullet there, another example we've seen, if you have to do, say, status updates or put together pitch decks or make invoices and things like that, you can have an intake process via an AppSheet app, and then use AppScript to generate these slides and documents and fill them with images and text content from the records that come through. And then you can also adjust all the file permissions and even the file location in Drive, all with AppScript. And it gives you a lot of flexibility there. The last two bullets, just to highlight another couple interesting things. One thing that's really powerful is the ability to leverage existing organizational structure from Google Workspace, if you're using, of course, to do things like look up an employee's manager, or even go up the chain, find the first person with director in the title and then send them an email to ask for approval. And so things like this are really powerful for workflows that you need, especially internally. And you can also do fancy things like automatically add or remove someone from a Google group to easily manage access and listservs and communication. So just some examples there. There's more you can learn as well from the short link you see there at goo.goal/AppSheet-AppScript. But here we're going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to hand this off to Chris now, who's going to show you guys a demo of how this actually works.
All righty, thank you, Carlin. So just to kind of set the stage a little bit, this is actually my demo is going to consist of starting very basic. I want to give everyone a chance to know 100% where to get started and actually step through a very simple example. And then I will kind of ramp it up and show something kind of fun and sexy, like a chatbot integration that we put together fairly quickly. So anyway, let me switch over to my demo screen. And so if you guys can all see my screen, I'll just kind of jump right into it. So first off, I just want to keep emphasizing that we have this little short link here. So definitely recommend folks check that out. And let me just walk through this really quickly. this is kind of like your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about AppScript and essentially how to call an AppScript function through an automation from AppSheet. All right. So as I'm scrolling through here, you can see there's a lot of good stuff here. Our team put together some pretty good materials here. You can even watch a video. You might recognize the voice in the video. And then there's a quick start here. Now, the quick start is also very helpful in that allows you to jump in and take use of a AppScript examples project that we put together. And so let me just do that. I'm going to click on this open project button. And then what this sets you up is like you can actually copy this project on your own. So then that will give you your own copy of the project. So I won't do that just yet. I'm going to jump over to my own copy here, and then we'll just walk through a little bit of this. So this is essentially like a nice toolbox of all these different use cases and examples where you can actually start to use some of those many like 30 plus services and APIs that Workspace provides. So as you can see, building out slide decks, sharing, working with Drive, working with Docs, sending emails. So it's all thrown in here to be quite useful. We'll also be looking to continue to add to this. So we have some really good experimental stuff that will, as time progresses, we'll add some more stuff as well. So how do I actually connect this code to an AppSheet app, or vice versa? How do I connect my AppSheet app over to this code? So what I'm going to do is create a very quick AppSheet app, and I'm going to call, for starters, just this very simple say hello function. And that's going to essentially allow me to establish that I do have a direct connection to this AppScript project. So how do I do that? Let's jump over to a spreadsheet that I have. And so this spreadsheet, I'm using it for a demo later on that I'll be talking through like an actual travel request use case. But for now, I'm just going to use it to generate a quick app. So I click on Extensions, AppSheet, and create an app. And so we'll give it a few seconds. And I'm just going to take the default app as it is. All righty, here we go. So in the preview pane on the right, we can see, once it syncs up, we'll have a functional app. Oh, and I'm not sure why that one will work. Live demo, we'll give it a shot. Give it another shot here. There we go. All right.
There it is.
Got the gremlins out of it, I guess. Anyway, so let me just show you really quickly. So if I show you the table, this is based off of that spreadsheet that I just started with, right? So what I'm going to do now is create an automation. So I'll click on automation, and essentially I'm going to create a new bot, and the bot will be triggered when a travel approvals record is created or updated. Now, I know it says send an SMS. That's okay, because I'm just going to go back and modify it a little bit. So I'm going to go over here to tasks, open up this little task here, and I'm going to select the call a script. And I can actually just change this. There we go. And here is where I want to actually specify that AppScript project that I was referring to before. So let's just pop that open. So this is Google Drive. And there's my copy of AppScript or AppSheet AppScript examples. I'll click select. And then I just have to select a function. So it's actually fetching all of the functions that are in that project. There we go. And then I select the say hello message. And I'm going to give it the one argument, which is I'll just say something like hello office hours. There we go. All right, so that's a nice little happy expression. Make sure it checks out okay. Waiting for the validation to kick in. Well, I'll hit save anyway and assume that it's okay. Okay, I think I'm going to assume everything's fine anyway. So all I have to do now to trigger the automation is I'll click on any record here. And as you can see, it's a fully updatable CRUD application. I can click on edit. And let's just change one of the updates here. So I'll select like a different date, for example, and I'll click save. And so now that's syncing back to the spreadsheet, and that should trigger our automation. And to see if the automation is happy, I will go to the logs or the executions. And I should be seeing the actual automation chiming in there. And there we go. So now we have our automation that kicked in and said, hello, office hours, right? So far, so good. So I'm going to change it up a bit. I'm going to now create, or essentially create an automation or connect to a more interesting use case here. So what this is another project that I put together, which actually creates essentially a response to a chat space. And it embeds a static map, Google map, into the image, into essentially the chat space. And it also provides a map URL by which you can connect it to. And so this is a pretty fun little app that we put together. And so we'll be, once we continue to add some more stuff to it, we'll also publish it probably in that AppScript examples project. So anyway, so there's a project. If you're familiar with how to work with chatbots, essentially you build out like a JSON set of content here. So I'll be passing over some of these different arguments like travel report ID, destination, departure, and so forth. All right. And then I post it, and then that would trigger it out to this chat room space here. So I actually created beforehand this chat room space, and that's where I'm going to see essentially the incoming demo there. All right. So let's go ahead and go back to my app. And instead of calling this AppScript examples project, I'm going to go over to this travel demo AppScript project, and I'll click select. And then let me just throw away that old argument and select one of the new functions here. And that's the one that I need. And so bear with me for a little bit. I'm going to add a couple of arguments. So I pop this up, and I want to add the ID. So I'll just grab it from the expression assistant. There we go. Validation's kicking in like we want it to. And the destination, I just select that from my fields here. So there's destination, departure date. So the idea for this one is just basically to create a travel request and have the approval come in. All right, so departure date, that's good. And these are just expressions that's going to pull the data directly from my application. And the reason for travel. And two more here. Cost estimate. And finally, our approval, basically a Boolean flag to see if it's approved or not. All right, so I'll click insert, I'll click save, and I'll save everything together. All right, all the parameters look good. So now I'm going to go in, kind of in the notion that I have these different travel requests coming in, and maybe I want to open one of these up, inspect it, and maybe do an update. So let's say change like a field here, like the departure date, bump it back a little bit. And then maybe also, I think I'm going to change the destination. I like going to Paris. So let's go to Paris. All right. So we're going to Paris, and I will say, yes, it's approved. I'll hit save. So that's going to sync in a second. And I'm going to jump over to my chat space. And if all goes according to plan, I will have a new chat message. And there it is right there. Boom. So there we go. We have our nice little chat message where we can see essentially all the details. And we're definitely going to Paris. We have this executive retreat and the cost estimate, and it's all approved. And if I wanted to, I can actually click on this little open in Google Maps and maybe get some tips on what to do in Paris, maybe check out some of the different sites and stuff. So anyway, that pretty much wraps up the demo, but I'll hand it back over to, I guess, the rest of the folks here. But anyway, yeah. And as you can see, the code was not that bad. So if you know how to work with AppScript and you get into AppSheet, you'll be well on your way to doing fun stuff like this.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we just have a couple of questions on that note. So the first question we have is, can you show the permissions needed for this script? So I don't know if we need to go back to the demo screen or if we're able to provide a response here.
So permissions by authorizations, I think. Yeah, I mean, typically when you're working with AppScript and you're essentially going through and accessing different services, you will get a authorization screen. And I didn't have one pop up for me because I'd already gone through and saved it and stuff like that. But for example, if I had a simple AppScript code that was going to call a particular service, and if I add, like, say, send an email, and I hit save, and then it gets executed, I will get that typical workspace authorization dialog that says, yes, this application will be executing as you, and it can send an email on your behalf. So that's essentially the permissions that you would go through for that. Otherwise, yeah, just basically it's AppScript, if you're familiar with AppScript. So yeah.
Maybe one thing to add for CH, if you're on the flip side of, there's the permissions to call the script and run it. There's also how you might share the script itself. And actually that, if you're not familiar, works just like a Google Drive file. You can share it with other folks on your team with edit or view access. And that's really nice too, because if someone who is a little bit more technical can write the script, you can share it with the rest of your team who is not technical, and they can just use it out of the box. And that can be quite nice.
And also, if you remember, there was that nice little feature where if you click on the information for the project, that little copy, and you create your own project. That's a very helpful way to just kind of help share code, I guess, on the AppScript side.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you. I think just one more question here, and then we'll move on to BigQuery. So I need an import CSV action from a parent table row to populate child table rows. Child rows should have parent ID column automatically populated. Is this possible without AppScript?
I guess for D-Bomb there, I guess, of course, the devil's in the details of your particular setup. And I think maybe that's a good one for us to dig into separately with you folks, or, in like a kind of support situation. I think generally speaking, I think you're asking if this is possible without AppScript. And I know there are a lot of things that you can do both from actually the sheet side as well as the AppSheet side to, for example, easily populate information in, connect different pieces of data together. So, connect the parent ID to the child rows just simply by making a reference.
Yep.
I think we have to kind of dig into the details for that, though. I don't know if, Peter, you have additional thoughts on that.
No, I'm thinking about it, and yeah, I imagine we'll have some ideas if we're able to follow up in the thread, in the common thread.
I would definitely recommend checking out like what we have posted out there on how to work with references and relational models, both in spreadsheets as well as Cloud SQL. Actually, one of my videos actually covers that exact point: how to use multiple tables in AppSheet, and it goes through how it sets up references automatically. You don't even have to do it on your own, and so definitely have a look at that if that's helpful. So,
Okay.
I guess just to your point, though, D-Bomb, certainly with AppScript, you probably could do a lot of that as well. And that's, of course, it requires a little bit more technical expertise, but it gives you a lot of flexibility, including things like now you can go and find the appropriate table and load in information into there as needed.
Yeah.
Great. And then we just have one more, and then we'll hop on over to BigQuery. So it looks like, is AppScript live? Because I don't see it in our AppScript under tasks.
Ron, great question. So we're actually rolling it out just this week. So I think by end of week or certainly next week, you'll see it live for all users. Right now, we're kind of gradually rolling it out. But yes, you should see it right there in soon.
Sounds good. With that, we will continue on with the presentation on BigQuery, but thanks for your questions. We'll get back to those at the end to just make sure to cover our content on BigQuery. Okay, so with that, here we go. And I'll hand it over to the team.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, sounds good. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Rachel. I am also a PM on the AppSheet team. Excited to be here talking to you about BigQuery. So if we can go to the next slide. Before I get into, sorry, can we go to the next slide? I'll just start talking. Great. So BigQuery, what is BigQuery? We'll talk about what BigQuery is, and then we'll talk about the additional functionality that we've added to our BigQuery connector on the next couple of slides, and then we'll see a demo of what you can actually do with this additional functionality. So for those of you that are not familiar with BigQuery, it is effectively a scalable data warehouse, not just any data warehouse though, one that is really specifically useful for supporting analytical workloads. So that becomes important when we talk about what you can do with the new functionality we've added to the BigQuery connector, in that it is not, BigQuery and BigQuery data warehouses are not necessarily designed to be a transactional warehouse. So you will not necessarily see the performance that you would expect from a transactional warehouse, which is by design. So keep that in mind as we talk about the upcoming functionality. I know I'm sort of alluding to what's coming here. Some of you are probably aware of it, but the functionality that we've added. So if you can go to the next slide here. Okay, so some of you may be familiar with the fact that we actually already have an AppSheet BigQuery connector. As of about an hour ago, it could only do read-only connections. I'm here to announce to all of you, as of a few minutes ago, we have fully launched our support for full CRUD operations with the BigQuery connector. So now you can do write operations as well. This is something that I know there's been a lot of interest in the community and for our customer base for a long time. So we're really excited to be able to provide that to you all. So consider this your launch announcement. Of course, there will be, updates in the community as well to that effect. But it is live now, and what it now allows you to do is use that BigQuery connector you already have, or you can set up now to write from AppSheet back to your BigQuery database. The reason I sort of harp on a little bit that this is not a transactional database is that if we go into the next slide here, some of our example use cases are around updates and processes that you will not necessarily need to be doing multiple times per second or need sort of real-time latency around. However, there are still lots and lots of things you can do with the BigQuery connector, and we have some of those use cases on the slide here. So for example, updating firmographic data in a table containing customer profiles, perhaps for storage or for use in another data set, submitting weekly citywide COVID-19 hospitalization numbers. That's a hard word for how much coffee I've had. Hospitalization numbers via tracking app to a nationwide data set, for example. Showing sort of a sales collateral engine type of use case here. So ML recommended collateral from a BigQuery powered sales enablement engine in the app at the point of sale, or sending it to a prospect in the field, and warehouse or store inventory counting and adjustments. These are a few of the many, potentially thousands, millions maybe, of solutions that you could perhaps automate via this solution. So we're really excited about it. I'm glad we were able to get it out to you and announce that here today. With that said, I'm actually going to hand it over to Rich, who is going to do a demo of what this looks like and how this actually works in the lab.
All right. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm a customer engineer here at Google, and we'll be going through how you would connect to a BigQuery table or a BigQuery data warehouse. So much of this process in the beginning is, pretty much the same as, you would before with the read-only access that we've had for the past year. But we'll just show it as a refresher to show you how relatively straightforward it is, and show you how to get an app connected to BigQuery. So right now, you can see here, I'm in BigQuery, right? And I have a table called Austin bike data, right? And this table has 1.3 million records in the table itself. And I want to add this to an application to utilize. And first I'm going to do is I need to create credentials for AppSheet to use, for my app to use. So I'm going to jump over to the credentials section under APIs and services. And I could simply click create credentials up here at the top and click service account. And then I'll be taken to a screen where I'm asked to fill in some details. So I'm going to just give this a boring title called AppSheet April 14th. And the service account ID will automatically populate, and I'll click create and continue. And then the second piece is probably the most important, is selecting the correct role for AppSheet to use. And we have those details in our help documentation on the minimal amount of roles you need to select in order to, not grant AppSheet all permissions level. For the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to click BigQuery admin as my role, but just kind of pay attention to that. In general, you don't want to overextend credentials past what is just needed for whatever service you're connecting to. And then after that, once you've selected a role, you can just hit done. And at that point, I've created credentials that I will then need to carry over to my AppSheet account. So down below, I see the new credentials that I made for April 14th, and I can click on that link to those credentials, and I'm going to go to keys. I need to create a key for AppSheet to use in order to leverage these credentials that I've created. So I'm going to click the keys tab, and I'm going to add a key, and I'm going to click create a new key, and I'm going to keep it as JSON and click create. And then there's going to be a text file that downloads. You can see that is downloading to my device, and we'll open that up. And what that looks like is something scary, but don't worry, you don't have to interpret this or all that. You're just going to want to simply make sure you copy the text in that text file so we can then add it to the AppSheet, to AppSheet when we're making a data source. So now within AppSheet, when I want to start using this table after I've created the credentials, I'm going to add a new data source. So basically when I go to start a new app, I'm going to start with my own data, and I'm going to choose my data here and add a data source to my account. And this is going to open up, a familiar screen here if you've added other data sources in the past. And you'll click, we'll give this a name. Once again, BigQuery, April 14th, and click on Cloud Database. And in the type dropdown on the next screen, we're going to choose BigQuery. And then this is where we're going to paste down at the bottom. We'll kind of jump ahead here to the bottom here, and we're going to paste that service account key that we copied from that text file, right? So that long gibberish looking text blob, we'll paste it into that field. And then we're going to also need the dataset ID and the cloud project ID. And to find this, we're going to go back to BigQuery, and we're going to look at our dataset properties. And so here's the details for our Austin bike data. And in that, you'll see that there's a table ID. And this table ID has the key information that we need to fill in those fields. The first one is your project name or the project ID, and the second one is your data set ID that form asks for. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy both of these at one time and jump back to my connection information. And I'm going to go ahead and paste both of those temporarily into project ID, and I'm going to just carry over the data set ID here to that top field and get rid of that period there. So we're just basically splitting that string apart where the period is and adding them to each of the fields. And then once we have that populated, we could hit test, and hopefully this works. Always fun getting a live demo, and it, hopefully nothing breaks. So the test was successful, and then I could go ahead and click authorize access. So now that I've authorized access, that data source is now added to my account. You can see right here as BigQuery April 14th. And then now I can just start building an application. So once I refresh my app screen, I could click make a new app, start with my own data again, and then I will choose that data source that I just added, BQ April 14th. And I could expand the table section, and there I see the two tables that exist in my BigQuery data warehouse. And I'll click the Austin bike data and immediately set up the application. So one of the things to consider is the amount of data that is, needs to be downloaded to the application. So as I mentioned before, there's essentially 1.3 million records that the application has to download to the client, right? And you'll notice the sync times when you probably connect to any BigQuery table, because that's the purpose of the BigQuery, is to process large amounts of data in, and analyze it. At an application level, you may find that users only needs access to a very small amount of that data at any given time. So there's going to be a couple methods that you can employ to ensure that the sync time of your BigQuery connected apps remains responsive, and you don't have app users waiting 30 to 50 seconds for data to download. And so the easiest and most straightforward way to fix this problem is to go and add a security filter to your newly added table to the app. So in this case, I have my Austin bike data under tables. And when I expand that, I can scroll down to security filter, and you'll see that there's a formula field here. So what I'm going to show you is just a static example of a formula that you can put in, but you can also have this dynamic in nature. So it could change based off of who's using the application, or what settings, the user settings that the user puts in as well. So I'm simply going to go put in start station ID as a field here, and I'm just going to only query all the records from my data warehouse where start station ID equals 1008. And I'm going to go hit 6. So now instead of downloading the max amount of records at any given time, my application only has to download maybe a couple thousand records, and the time it takes to sync is a lot lower. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions that have come up. But one thing I haven't mentioned yet is there is a hard limit to your BigQuery tables and how much the app will retrieve at any given time, and that's 100,000 records. Now that 100,000 doesn't mean you could only ever query 100,000 records from the warehouse. It just is the limit that the data will be downloaded at any given time. So when you add a security filter, you'll still have access to all the records from the table that matches that security filter. It's just that whatever filter you add there will truncate and essentially cut off at 100,000 records. So keep that in mind. Use these security filters. You can also add, in addition to that, you could also add views, query views to your table directly as well. This would be one example here. You could create your own query in BigQuery and then save that query as a view itself. So once I save that as a view, if that, I don't know if that's saved or not. Anyway, once you save it as a view, when you're adding your data to the to your application from your data source, you'll see that view that you can use as well. But keep in mind that would be read only. Any views you make will be read only, and the new CRUD updates would not apply in that situation. So I'll pause there for any questions, but that kind of wraps up what we're going to demo today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we have just a few questions coming in on that subject, and then we'll kind of go through all of the questions that people have been asking and those that have come in through the community as well. So let's get to those. All right. Our first question here we have is, can BigQuery connect to an existing AppSheet application?
Yeah, an existing one that you've had in place. Yes. So any applications you have can follow the same process, right? So, we'll say that if this is my existing application that I've been using for months, maybe you're simply going to add a new table to that application, just like you would do with any other data source in the application. So yeah, you could totally add BigQuery to any existing applications that you have.
Okay, great. And then Our next question is, so has the 10,000 limit increased as well?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, the 10,000 limit is 100,000 for BigQuery. I believe, you know, there's a connected sheets piece. If you're using Google Sheets and you're using connected sheets, there's a 10,000 limit there. But what I demoed today was direct connection to BigQuery, and that limit's 100,000 records. And as I mentioned before, that 100,000 is not an absolute, you can only access the first 100,000 records in the data set. It's just whatever security filter you have in place will truncate at 100,000. So it's important that you design those security filters into your app to consider that limit.
Got it. And then just generally seeing a few questions come in about the recording. You will be able to see this on demand via the same YouTube link, and we'll also share the recap post with written Q&A in the AppSheet community, and that link is in the YouTube description. So just to let you know, if you're taking down notes, that you can refer back to the recording at another time. Okay, so I think going back to some questions around AppScript. So we're just going to open it up generally for questions now. So please feel free to keep adding those into the chat if you have those. One question now is there any code lab about AppScript and AppSheet?
Yeah, I can take that. So we have put together actually a fair amount of material. So that link that I shared earlier does have a tutorial, has a quick start, which is code lab-like. Also with Google I/O, we actually created a small code lab that actually walks through kind of the same steps of using the example AppSheet AppScript project as well. But I would say just stay tuned to that same link, and you can see all the AppSheet AppScript content and all there. It'll be updated as we get more stuff as well. So.
Awesome, and we'll include that link specifically in the community as well, so you can reference that. Okay. How can I create a PDF that joins information from two tables?
So, oh yeah, Rich.
Yeah, so we have some documentation in the help articles that show that there's a start function essentially that you could use in your report generation, and we'll make sure we share this in the community. But there's a start function you can use that you define that you can add a select query, a select function to essentially, and have it look into other tables. So while any report or email or whatever you're generating from automation will only run from the perspective of a single table, you can add that start function in there to your report generation to essentially tell AppSheet to go check in other tables and retrieve the data in that table, and you could use that as well. Another solution too would be to carry over some virtual columns to your primary table that the bot's connected to. It just depends on the quantity of those columns. Obviously, if it's one or two, it's probably more straightforward that just add a virtual column that picks that up from the other table. But if it's something more substantial, you'll want to, go that start function route.
Okay. One question here on the topic of BigQuery is, did you demonstrate writing data from AppSheet back to BigQuery? Since that was
yeah.
Okay.
Did I miss that part? All right, that's a good call out. Apologize, everyone. So all right, so we're if you want to share my screen again. Yep. We'll do that really quick. Sorry about that. All right, so here I have my screen here, and this app, I didn't have to do any configuration. The only thing you want to double check is in the table settings itself that you've allowed updates, adds, and deletes from your table. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and make a couple transactions, and you'll notice that by default my fields are all, they can't be edited. And the reason, that's just an extra safeguard we put in place, because typically BigQuery, like we mentioned before, is read only. So this is another safeguard we put in place, but to fix that, you'll want to go to view columns, and you know, just like with any other table, you're going to want to enable editing for those specific those fields that you want to be editable. And once you do that, then we can then you know, come in here, make changes, and then, you know, save those changes to the database. And I'm going to force a sync here to make those changes. And then just keep in mind too, like we mentioned, BigQuery is not a transactional database. So you're naturally going to see that saving data or updating data is just going to take longer. And that's just the nature of the back end there. But at this stage, I've written back to BigQuery, and I could also delete records from BigQuery as well, or even add new records to the app. So there's a delete, and then I can also, you know, fill out a form and insert those fields directly to. So if I were to put something in like bike ID, something that I'll remember, you know, 20,005, if I remember that. Make sure I have a trip ID in there. This is where it gets tricky, where you have to make sure that your validation rules are strong, because you don't want, you know, poor data going back into BigQuery. So after I've, you know, saved those changes and add, I could then come back to my table here and then query that bike ID that I put in there. And then run, oh, bike ID is no underscore, and then run that query.
Make it a string, perhaps?
It is probably a string, yeah, I suppose. Thought it was an integer. Oh, we got an error, probably because it was, sorry, yeah. So in general too, you'll want to check to make sure that your type here is aligned with bike ID. Somehow it got set to long text, and it is a number. Find number here. Let's try that again. Nope. So in the interest of time, we'll you know, we'll kind of stop there. I don't want to run out of time on, you know, putting this update, but yeah, you know, when you add BigQuery, you're going to have to make sure that your types are aligned with what you've set in BigQuery, and you know, go from there.
Okay, great. Thank you. And one question in here that we have is any chance for a step-by-step guide, if there's something that already exists, or if there's a plan for that in the future?
Is this in relation to BigQuery or to AppScript?
It wasn't specified. I'm assuming it is BigQuery.
BigQuery, and that's certainly something we have updated our help documentation to reflect this new functionality, but totally agree there's a lot here, and we will work on getting something out.
I also have a video on that too.
Yeah,
It's like just walks you through step by step, basically. So it's the Building with AppSheet video series. So feel free to check that out. So.
Awesome. Yeah. And again, we'll make sure to include that all in the recap so you have it in one place. Okay. Are there any plans to allow BigQuery connection from core plan, or will this require enterprise?
Great question. So right now, we do not have changes in store for our pricing and packaging, but it's something we're always looking at. So not at the moment.
All right. Does AppSheet handle the BigQuery structs and array constructs?
Chris, do you want to take this one?
Margaret.
Yeah. So I would be lying to you if I'm just, you know, I'd be just guessing without actually investigating it myself. So I'll have to get back. We'll make sure we post something on this answer. But in general, if it can be presented in a BigQuery table, in theory it should work. But I haven't tried it myself, so.
Okay. If I try to connect AppSheet with Google Translate API, do I have to go through BigQuery, or is there a way to connect directly?
So yeah, there's a couple options, right, that are quick and easy. You know, you can obviously leverage, you know, APIs directly if you wanted to, by sending webhooks to them and having something that comes back into the app. But something relatively straightforward that maybe some folks don't know about is, you want to share my screen again?
Yep.
Well, you can actually use Google Translate in Sheets. So you could have a table that your app is connected to. And here I have a very simple table with words and words translated, right? And I could just use what's called Google Translate function that's built into the platform, if I could spell it right, and basically, you know, create the translation automatically. So I could, you know, I click on the word to identify it, and then there's basically a source language, which in this case is English, and there's also, you know, and maybe I want to translate it to Spanish, right? And that's all I have to put, and then I could have a formula in the background that, you know, generates this at the time of sync, and you could display that into the app itself. And I've also posted stuff in the past that shows this method. If you look up in the community, yeah, there's like a starter app for multilingual. I don't remember the name of it exactly, but there's a multilingual starter app essentially that you can search for in the community that actually has an example app of this in action. So in addition to that, you can also, you know, leverage AppScript as well. And it's a fairly simple script that you can use. So you could, you know, via workflow pass the words to an AppScript and leverage that API, and then have that AppScript return that data to the application.
Rich, I'll make a quick pitch for the tips and tricks section of the community, because I think like what you're describing, I'm pretty sure there are a few examples there if you just search for language translate in the tips and tricks of what you're describing.
And you should see that link to the tips and tricks come through in the chat shortly if you want to have a quick link to that. Otherwise, the link to the community and you can navigate to the tips and tricks from there is in the YouTube description. Okay. Any more on that one, or can we move on to the next question?
I saw a question really quick here from Francis. It was on the same topic. Can a webhook bring data back into an application? So what we've talked about today with AppScript functionality is one way. So it basically sends data out to AppScript, but AppScript has the functionality to send calls back to your app as well. So you would have to build that into your script functionality, and that would be under the help article called Enabling the API, and using AppScript functions that could send that data back to your app.
Awesome. Moving along, how do we know in AppSheet if BigQuery can do CRUD?
So this is the functionality we just released, was to allow BigQuery to be able to perform write and edit operations and deletes as well. So you should see this live now. If you go and set this up, it should be functioning.
Awesome. We'll need some way to stage changes when we're demoing writes to BigQuery so they can be reviewed before they're committed. Any suggestions?
Yeah, so this would to accomplish that, you'd have some transactional table in the middle that would act as your workflow mediator. So that could be a sheet or, you know, some SQL database if you wanted to, but that you would use a combination of workflows to, you know, basically allow people to look at the BigQuery data, probably click an action that then generates, you know, a form to that transactional table. and edit and then trigger a workflow such as an approval routine or something like that that you make. And then at that final stage of approval, once it's been fully vetted, you can have an automation that then copies that data to BigQuery.
Maybe a good example for interactive emails, dynamic emails in Gmail.
Yep.
Good point. Okay, a few more coming through. Is AppScript integration only push or can pull data?
So it depends what you mean. I guess AppScript itself has full capabilities, push and pull or what have you. Obviously, when you set it up with the call script, you're sending the parameters. Then you're kind of relying essentially on the whatever code you have on the AppScript side to fulfill whatever you expect it to do. That can either be, say, call different services or push out a message to a chatbot like I showed earlier. So in that sense, yeah, the integration is essentially calling and you send the data. So it would be a push, I would say. But you could kind of get the effect of pulling data if you have code on the AppScript side to push it back into an object that the AppSheet application is working with directly as well, such as like updating a sheet, things like that. Hopefully that explains it somewhat.
Awesome. Can NoSQL data be queried too, or is it only relational data?
So
the BigQuery, or, yeah.
So if it can be a BigQuery table, it should be able to be queried. But I think that this kind of ties in with that array construct question that was brought up a couple questions ago. I haven't tested it myself, but you know, if you have this data presented in a BigQuery table, then you should be able to connect to that.
Okay. Great. I think that covered, or we have one more question, I think, here before we get into some from the community. If you do have any more questions, please feel free to keep adding those in and we can hop through with the remaining time that we have. Okay. If I understand this correctly, is that a database connection? We had to connect more than 23 IPs using a simple SQL table. Will that change? Might need more information on this one, but I don't know if anyone has thoughts.
I'm not happy with that process, but yeah, I think it's worthy of digging into further.
That's helpful to hear. I think there's been a little bit of a legacy issue with this that we need to deal with. So it's good feedback. Yeah, when you set up a cloud SQL or I guess any SQL table, you definitely have to go through this very manual process. But once you get over it, things seems happy. So yeah.
Okay, and then we do have a question. Are there plans for AppSheet in Brazil?
Well, sure there are.
I love the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I had to share.
Let's discuss it.
Yep.
No, I without a doubt, I think whatever opportunities there are. I mean, in the past, there's always developer events in Brazil, and we always try to make a good presence. But
anecdotally, I know we hear a lot of feedback from South America in general, but from Brazil, I don't know exactly what this question is getting to, but it's related. I think it's interesting. Oh, Rich, do you have?
Yeah, I saw another comment previously as well, talking about Portuguese, translation. I think in general that's an opportunity, as far as for a lot of different regions around the world, right? The app editor, in certain regions, English isn't good enough. Yeah. And, having the ability to have other languages, I think is what, he's probably asking, or, there was an individual before too that was talking about the need for Portuguese.
That makes a ton of sense. And we have I mean, especially, over the last couple of years, a lot of demand for better localization. So I know that's top of mind with the team, and it'll be a big effort, but yeah, I think there are definitely a lot of regions that would benefit from it.
Sounds good. Okay, can AppScript return a JSON array and display it as a table in AppSheet?
In the current implementation, no, not what you're describing. So you, like I said, you push the content out, you send the arguments, you send expressions, but you would have to rely on whatever AppScript programming to essentially update a sheet, for example, that an AppSheet front-end app is synchronized to.
So yeah, and that said, for right now though, to address the situation, there is a fairly popular function that you can find if you just search for import JSON AppScript. There's an AppScript you can add to your sheets that basically can query any API and then flatten that response into a tabular form. So that's something you could do today, and then obviously connect your AppSheet app. And I've done it myself multiple times to leverage, easier, in an easier manner, connect to APIs instead of having to use an API management platform or something like that.
Okay, I think that wraps up most of all of the questions that we got through the chat so far. I will just start with some of those questions that have been asked in the community. So let's try to speed through these maybe with the remaining 5 minutes that we have. Okay, so actually we may have already covered this one, but how do you connect Google Translate API to AppSheet? I may be wrong. Maybe we didn't cover.
I think Rich covered some good options for that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, the sheet or an AppScript. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Can we have the ability to use a REST API directly from AppSheet?
So I can offer, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but AppSheet does have the ability to call a webhook, essentially sending out like a HTTP request. The thing that you don't necessarily have, we touched on this, is you don't have the ability to process a response. That being said, you can call really any REST API from AppScript. So, you could set up like an AppScript bit of code that uses its built-in URL fetch call to call out to any third-party API. Also, one of the nice benefits of AppScript is that you can also grab an OAuth token. And so you could essentially do an authenticated OAuth request to whatever REST API and then process the results. And then and with AppScript, you have the ability to process results, and then that could just be a final result that you could then push back into something that the AppSheet front-end app is directly dealing with.
Awesome. Okay, how can I generate reports and print them or export to PDF directly from AppSheet?
Do you mind, Rich? I think maybe you have a quick example, but I wanted to make a comment first because I think there were a couple other questions just about generating PDFs in general. And I just wanted to level set that in automation, right, you can do some events or tasks, right, that can be generated, include sending emails, sending push notifications, sending text messages, or generating documents. When you send an email, or if you generate a document, which could be like a PDF or an HTML file, or I think like a JSON file, you can use a template, like a Google Doc template or a Word doc template that just has the variable fields of the data in your app. So that's a high level. There's a lot of reading material in this, but that is what this is alluding to. Maybe, I know we're, Rich, this is alluding to in the app, a button that just generated directly, which is it's a little bit complicated.
Yeah. So yeah, unfortunately, there's no simple button to check, say download from your app, but you can do this. So what you're looking for, instead of maybe using the ability to create an attachment in an email, there's an option when you create an automation task, an option to save a file to your file store. And with that, you could predefine the file name and the path to that. So it's a combination of creating a task that can save that file to a specific location in your file store, and then have an action that is added to your views that basically says, download file or open file.
Okay, I know we just have about a minute left. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us. We're just going to hop over to some final resources for you. So again, that's the first link at the top is to the community where you can find tips and tricks, links to our documentation. And then that second link there is directly around AppScript that we were referencing throughout the presentation. And then a third piece is just if you enjoyed this, if you would like to see something else, we'd love to hear feedback for a future topic or ideas, something that you'd like us to cover in particular. And then lastly, our next office hours is in May on the 19th. So save the date for that. More information will be in the community as well as with the recap from this session and the supporting resources. So stay tuned and keep an eye on the community for that, as well as the responses to some of the questions that we weren't able to get to. With that, I just want to open it up if there are any final thoughts from the team. Thank you all so much for your insights and presentation today. I just want to see if you had any final thoughts before we wrap up today.
Thanks everyone for showing up. It's exciting to see all the comments and ideas.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you everyone for joining us. Stay tuned for next month, and we'll keep in touch in the community until then. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.